Hi everyone, I'm Archie Mari and I will be presenting today about the Food and Drug Administration law here in the US. First, I will review about the law. The Food and Drug Administration is one of the oldest and most respected consumer protection agencies in the country. It is responsible for ensuring the safety of food, drugs, medical devices, cosmetics, and a wide range of other products. Now, Janet Elliker said that the FDA is responsible for the authority of the Federal Food, Drugs, and Cosmetics Act for ensuring that such items are safe, correctly labeled, and that they are successfully uh, in terms of medical field and with drugs. But Neil 14 further defined FDA's responsibilities, wherein it does not cover meat and poultry, bottled water, and alcohol beverages with less than 7% of alcohol content, because there are existing organizations for those commodities. The question is why? Why do we need to regulate everything that we put into our mouths? Because of jams, a sweet mixture of fruit boiled with sugar and water. So Suzanne Junod claimed that back in the Great Depression, where the demand for poor quality, cheap goods is extremely high because people are desperate, people have no income, and they're starving basically. So they implemented a distinctive name for Viso. A law enabled the marketing of foods that would have been otherwise illegal under the Act of 1906 with jam. Since they have little fruit content, they should have been deemed adulterated or misbranded because it's basically more sugar and water than the actual fruit. Um, there were traces of quote unquote adulterated products way back then, such as flour with chalk that makes bread, pepper with juniper berries that also looks like pepper, and cattle food sprayed with urea to increase its protein content but can potentially render the cattle ill and incapable. But jams are the ones that led FDA of their breakthrough. Now let me introduce to you Mr. Charles M. Wetherill. He's a chemist. FDA was officially established back in 906, but Wallace Jansen clarified that the FDA we now come to know dates back from 1862 as a research entity when the first chemist in the new Department of Agriculture, Charles M. Wetherill, founded a laboratory and immediately started examining samples of food, soil, fertilizers, and other agricultural substances. Now, the first reported chemical study was about winemaking. So, Mr. Wetherill here was dealt with the dilemma of adding sugar and increasing the alcohol content because it is considered adulterated and misbranded, but they later on decided that well, it can be done. It can be accepted. So they also asserted now that adulteration can be done, like what we do now in jams. We're legally consuming jams nowadays, right? So, so furthermore, if you're gonna see these three major events here in the PowerPoint, the law gained its distinction in the US in the 1920s during the World War I, had resulted to expansion in the industry to supply jams, jellies, and other preserved to supply allies and the military because they're mostly on the war and staying in forests and campsites and they need food. Following the stock market crash of 1929, the demand for processed foods under the distinctive name Proviso expanded on 1930, which is when the Canner's Amendment was enacted. So when canned fruit and vegetable manufacturers went to the Congress, they were able to convince them to have this enactment, which authorized the establishment and implementation of canned foods except meat and poultry, of course, like what I mentioned earlier, that they're under a different organization. Substandard goods could be marketed, but they had to bear a black label called crepe. So let's say this is the can right here. It will have like a black label here saying that this product is good, but it has poor quality. So that's the Canner's Amendment. The label is called crepe, like the French dessert that we love. So moving on. After that amendment, the officials, of course, the Congress, did not like it at all. I mean, who would like it? Probably because it's bad for business. I mean, who would want your product to be labeled as good but has poor quality? So President Roosevelt that time was able to push the law because taking into consideration the majority welfare of the citizen of the public. Now I'm going to talk more about the summarize. This is just something that I summarized to help us all understand the prohibited acts and penalties according to Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. So this is very long. I decided to take 5 out of that law into the most commonly broken law in that law. So the first 3 are somewhat the same, just in different perspective. So to introduce, to produce, to receive or pay adulterated, misbranded, and proliferated food, drug, device, or cosmetics into the interstate commerce. So if you produce, if you introduce, if you receive or pay them, then you're committing a federal crime. If you refuse permit entry to factory inspectors, that's also a federal crime, so you should let them inside your factory for inspections. To forge, counterfeits, simulate, or falsely represent, or without proper authority, using any mark, stamp, tag, label, or other identification device authorized. So you can have a legal product, but if you obtain it illegally, then that's illegal. Moving on. So if you're a person or a manufacturer that violates, either you pay $1,000 to $250,000, or you can go to prison from 1 year to 10 years. And you can get debarment, you can get seizures, like all your products will be seized by the government. You can be denied of approval into releasing your products in the public, and of course, suspension. I want to quickly discuss. So since the primary goal of every business industry is to maximize the value of the shareholders' wealth, abiding to the law and protecting the consumer rights will help them achieve that goal. The effect on the one product can subsequently affect another product, such as the incident last 2014 where M&M's recalled millions worth of chocolate with undeclared peanut butter content last 2016, with Mars chocolate bars recalling their products from 55 countries after traces of plastic is found, costing the company millions of dollars, causing the shareholders and stakeholders to suffer for the loss. Now, to fully understand the advantages of the legislation on food and health, we should first, of course, consider what's make it good. So these are just 5 things that I listed that I think that we should all remember in appreciating the Food and Drug Administration regulation. The first one is less foodborne illnesses results to less lawsuits. So it would result to a more profits to your company if people are not trying to sue you because you're poisoning them. Second is simplified its approval processes. So before they have a process from 2 to 3 years